Chris, let me do a quick intro on you, and then you can do the intro on the other mentors. Although I know all of you here, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining. So Chris has been a longtime mentor and also a favorite mentor among many different founders in the program. Starting off in San Francisco, coming into the Silicon Valley program, and you've mentored. I mean, it's hundreds of founders all over the world, and so you've done a lot of work with Africa too. So. I've always enjoyed learning from you and appreciate your support. So Chris, why don't you do just a brief intro, and then we'll introduce the other panelists as well.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And I really appreciate everything. A big shout out to the FounderX committee leaders, Jonathan Adeo. It was great today. But I really want to spend some time thanking the people that we have on this panel tonight. For most of them, it's the middle of the night. I think it's maybe 3 a.m. in Simon Turner's area, maybe 4 a.m. for Anna. And, Chintan, him and I have been up talking for the last 3 hours, so I'm not even sure if he goes to bed. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about advising and global mentorship. This is one of those things that is often talked about. When the pandemic came about, the whole dynamic of how we mentored and how we advised startups changed. And in some parts of the world, it became tougher when you couldn't necessarily go to a physical location for the accelerator. In other parts of the world, like Ghana, it has been a saving grace that's really changed the dynamic. So I have 3 people that I've learned just a tremendous amount from here with us tonight. I have my buddy Chintan Oza from India, not only as the regional director of India for Founder Institute. We were in Accelerator Lab together. We started in cohort 4 of VC Lab together, and you've led organizations in Mumbai, you've led it in Goa, Ahmedabad, but your career, the last 22 years, plus you spent working in the tech space. You went to Berkeley. My business partner, Russell, who you heard from yesterday, he went there, but you also spent some time at Georgia Tech, and he went to MIT. So there's a problem. I'm just going to let you know when it comes down to that. But I always appreciate, having you here with us in pretty much anything that we do, Chintan. So welcome tonight from India. Where are you actually coming from? What city?
I'm based out of Mumbai, so city of Bollywood.
The city of Bollywood. Well, it's a great city. I've spent time mentoring there, and we're going to talk about some amazing things that I've learned that I didn't know until I got involved there. I'm going to jump over to Anna Lindbäck. Anna it was one of these things that there's always somebody in the room that says very little, but then when you talk to them, knows everything, says all the right things, literally, like, she practices what she preaches, and it shows. And, she reached out to me during Accelerator Lab, and she said, Chris, would you be a mentor in the Stockholm program at the time? And I got to tell you, I'm from Rockford, Illinois, and we have a wonderful Swedish pancake house there. But that was about all that I knew, right? I know that we had 5 or 6, sister cities, predominantly in Sweden. So I didn't really understand this. And then Anna kind of gave me the 411 on what's going out in the Nordic region. I learned so much about this. I generated a passion I never thought I had. Anna not only was one of the co-founders of that Nordic program for Founder Institute, but, she started her career in what I'll call environmental issues. You have a degree in environment. Somehow through an entrepreneurship, she ended up working in things like tobacco and food waste, some divergent industries. That just tells you the polymathic mind that this person has. Anna, so happy to have you here tonight. What part of Sweden are you coming from?
Stockholm, the greatest startup capital, I would say, in the Nordics. We do top the league in terms of innovation and impact investment. It's a great region to do business, and especially for startups, because of our social system and the way our universities even fund entrepreneurship and encourage students to start companies.
Look at that. I told you she was good at business development, right? So take notice of this, Sweden. When you need an ambassador, we've already got one right here built into the FI program. Simon Turner's the next person I'm going to talk about. Now, Simon Turner, very humble guy, regardless of his shirt this evening. He is just one of the most amazing people. But when I got involved, I actually got involved mentoring in Africa on accident. It seems weird, but somebody reached out who was in the Abuja program in Nigeria, and they said, Chris, I'd I'd love to do office hours with you. And I didn't know what to do. I reached out to my friend Ryan, global operations director, and I said, how do you make this happen? And I did my first program in Abuja, and I fell in love with Africa. And I couldn't explain this. And this guy, Simon Turner, reached out to me. He said, Chris, listen, we had a whole different ballgame going up here in Ghana. And, he's like, listen, check out this YouTube link. And then I come to find out he's more or less like the Mark Cuban type character on their version of Shark Tank, and their version of, it's kind of like Shark Tank meets Apprentice, the McDan prize. And it's the largest, I believe, entrepreneurship prize that they have in all of Africa. And here, this humble guy, Simon Turner, an Australian military former elite gymnast, ends up being the leader of the FI Ghana program. And I'm just going to ask right away for all of our watchers tonight, how did that happen, Simon?
Which bit?
You weren't what I was expecting to work with when I got involved in what I consider to be one of the best ran FI programs in the world in FI Ghana. I did not expect Simon Turner, an Australian military veteran, to be the leader of that program. And it just goes to show what amazing things that market really has going on. But how did that happen, Simon? How did you end up running Ghana?
Okay, this can be a good segue into founder well-being. That after after the military of 10 years and then 10, 12 years of being an entrepreneur, I burned out badly and came here to volunteer, quite simply, in 2015 and never left.
Wow.
And here we are.
That's it. Look, we're all learning.
Mark Cuban. I think you're setting me up for a fall by saying
that. I think that our listeners tonight will love hearing that. And you don't necessarily look like them, but I tell you, if you got that spice and you've got that spunk, and you're a prolific advisor and mentor, you've done so many things in your career, and I'm honored to have here. And I really appreciate the warm welcome. As a mentor coming from the Silicon Valley program, and regardless if you're an entrepreneur in residence, I was intimidated. And it was one thing I thought, making an impact in Abuja, I thought could have been just a fluke. And then you showed me in a whole different side of Africa. Now I know I mentor, and I think maybe 6 programs overall in Africa. And I really want to thank you for that. I'm going to go over to my friend Chintan right now. And, if there's ever been somebody that has marketed a region and taught me about, just entrepreneurship from a different perspective, it's been you, Chintan. And, one of the questions that's often comes in is, I was talking to a startup the other day. I knew you were the right person for them to talk to. And, they said to me, they said, Chris, what is this guy all over in Mumbai, India, going to be able to do for my startup over here in Las Vegas, Nevada? And I said, you have no idea. You have no idea the knowledge that this person has. But in India, not only, I think a lot of people don't realize this, that not only is it literally the fastest growing in pretty much everything, the startup space, but they have, in 1 year, they had more than 40 unicorns that came out of there. There's a husband and wife that each have a unicorn. In India, there was somebody that started a company and in less than 6 months, right at around 6 months, became a unicorn. What is going on in India? How is this possible? And how do we export this around the world? They do have the best internet too. There you are. Yes. There you are.
So we have the cheapest internet. We have second largest mobile app user base. We have largest skilled workforce, and that is an English-speaking workforce. So this is where India stands. We produce highest number of graduates, 7 million graduates every year. So that is on the advantage side. We are already a software capital for the world. In March 2021, we exported more software than in a country exported oil. So our software exports exceeded the oil economy. As far as emerging technology is concerned, we are having a strong foundation, be it blockchain, be it AI. Government is one of the lead adopters of technology. So there is a huge transformation which is happening at government level, and then that triggers a dominoes effect, and that is where we are having we took almost 10 years to create 37 unicorns, and in last 1 year we created 44 unicorns. So this is the kind of volume and the way it is taking off.
I mean, it's really quite remarkable. I think you're also the second in crypto adoption, I think right behind Vietnam. And I think it's important to note, I spent a lot of my career working in marketing, web development, PR, and communication. And I actually had somebody come and live with me in Illinois from Bangalore and ran just probably the most prolific back-end team that I've ever worked with. And, I think oftentimes startups, they'll go and they'll look at the idea, we're going to do everything. We're going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to reinvent it 10 times over. And, I think there's sometimes some hesitation thinking, if I go to and outsource this to a team in India or something like that, that somehow there's going to be an inferior mark put on it. Not because India is the best at this, but just the idea that they couldn't do it themselves. And I know that, seeing how you mentor in programs around the world, I think people like this, advisors like you, really help close that gap and show people how they can connect with India. Would you say that that is something that India thrives in, the idea of being able to sit behind the scenes and help develop some of the most prolific technologies in the world?
Yeah, definitely. We have been doing this for years together. So software and services industry are dominant industries in India. Now, because of the global, change of dynamics, we are now picking up in manufacturing. So as far as the manufacturing risk index report in 2021, India ranked at number 3. So we are emerging as a preferred destination for manufacturing. Samsung, if you look at Samsung, the largest factory Samsung has outside Korea is in India. Largest development center outside US is in Hyderabad for Microsoft. So as to any other software majors. So that is how, apart from softwares, manufacturing is picking up, and services we have been championing for years together. And as in when we mix these things with the local economic scenario, definitely we are well suited. We are the largest English-speaking population, and that makes us gives us an advantage to deal with the rest of the world.
That's amazing. And 10% of the world's unicorns come from India, and being at the top of the charts is no unheard story for the Nordic regions. I'm jumping over to Anna here. One of the things I mentioned how I was intimidated, coming into that marketplace, and I think I know why. Right. So when we were sitting, as mentors, and when nothing has started yet, we're all sitting in the room. Everybody talks about the weather right now. Now there's this kind of, every family's used to talking about the weather when the in-laws are there, but this is a very common practice. And it was amazing to see how it was brought up. It was like, when we don't have anything to talk about, we talk about the weather. But what I also loved about this is I noticed, I come from politics. If you all can't figure that out by now, I don't know what else to tell you. So in essence, I've been hyping things my entire life, Republican side, Democrat side, president side. And then I get into Sweden, and I don't think that I've ever experienced kind of a more humble market, right? You don't see people being braggadocious. You don't see the companies really screaming about what they have, even when they're in the number one in the world for the type of innovation they're in. They come from such a supportive environment. People are learning entrepreneurship every single year in school. People get to take weeks off of school to go explore opportunities and careers. Now, with this, explain to me this whole thing about, kind of braggadocious isn't built in, hype is not built in. Does that slow down the entrepreneurship world? Does that slow down the founder?
No, it doesn't really. I would say but with humbleness comes a lot of grit, actually. So I would say that I'm an exception. I like to brag, and that's mainly why I'm a business developer in Sweden, to help people brag better. But it's there's a humbleness and a sort of a scrappiness. So we're the country of, I guess. The humbleness comes from, I think, us being a potato country and famine like 100 years ago. And I think we're just, as a country, had to work really hard. And everybody works hard. So there's nothing really to brag about there. And then that sort of continued, maybe. I have no idea why we're so humble. But with that comes, not having a habit to spend a lot of money immediately, being very careful and frugal, and which means that it's also a great bootstrapping culture, I would say, from Swedes. And one reason why with bootstrapping, then you have to test your ideas early on. You have to start selling and get customers. And I think that's the main reason why so many companies are successful in Sweden, because you go out early on and talk to customers.
I think you're one of the best mentors. I mean, you're phenomenal at what you do. You teach me so much, but you're hands-on. You have over 4,000 hours experience working with people and launching and developing and all this. I'm going to ask you, what is the difference between a mentor and an advisor? What is the difference for that in the startups?
I don't know. I think that I know that there's a difference between being a coach and being an advisor. I would say maybe coaching and mentorship would be similar. Mentorship is about asking questions and asking the right questions, and also sort of encouraging the individual, I think. And coaching is a lot about that sort of mentality too. With advice, then you actually give concrete, you tell people what to do. There's questions. I do ask questions to help entrepreneurs develop their ideas and specify more. That's the main problem when people aren't specific enough. They want to save food waste, so they make sustainable ketchup. And then, no, you're saving tomatoes, maybe not all of the food waste, you're saving tomatoes. So asking sort of questions to be specific and narrow-minded, more narrow. But I do tell people, like when I notice that you should talk about tomatoes and not all of the food. So that's what advice is. Yeah.
And you're so good at it, right? I love being told when I'm wrong by you, right? For some reason, it just feels good. Like, Chris, this is not going to work. Here's a better way. So I appreciate that, and from a country that, is fairly humble about their approach to somebody that's fairly lighthearted about helping companies launch. We'll look over at Ghana. And, Simon once told me, he said, Chris, we don't have any unicorns in Ghana, but don't worry. That's not necessarily a bad thing. And I'm like, Simon, you're the expert here. So help me understand this. You have no unicorns there. It's not a bad thing. Why is it not a bad thing? Why is it great?
That's a big, broad, sweeping comment. Yes, I did say that. I can't hide away from that. But if we look at what's happening in Africa, certainly when it comes to West Africa, Nigeria gets all the attention. And I don't think, certainly when we deal with VCs, that some of the things we get asked here aren't necessarily appropriate, and often the VC option is the only option, because we lack other instruments and we lack access to capital, whether it be debt. We can't just go and use our credit cards, because you just can't get one. Like, you can't go get a loan because you've got to have 100% collateral over 2 years, 35%. It's just not possible. So why don't we have them? I then have to go a little bit into from a Ghana perspective and talk about the system here, or maybe the culture. That we have. Ghana is a pretty stable country with some good, solid systems and institutions. And sometimes I think we just don't have to hustle as hard to make things work. And we are such a smaller population. If we're only 30 million compared to Nigeria, 200 plus million. So all African countries are not created equally. Ghana is one of 54. I'm sure we will have one, but I hope it's for the right reasons, not just to hock ourselves in debt. We have enough debt here as it is. When the right business comes along ready to be a unicorn, by all means, that's fine, but let's do it for the right reasons and the right model.
Simon, I think. Go ahead, Anna.
Ghana?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
should they switch they build their company, start up bootstrapping or whatever in Nigeria, and then they go to Ghana to like.
Well, part of the problem with that is that we don't have Ghana's not very friendly in terms of foreign ownership. So whilst we're happy for Twitter to launch here, and we're happy for Google to launch here, we wouldn't have been happy 15, 20 years ago for them to start here, because of like to start have 10% foreign ownership is $250,000. So if we're not startup friendly in that sense, whereas Nigeria, it's much easier. And certainly many other countries, certainly in East Africa, they've got Kenya, for example, is far more set up for this than we are. But we do have a startup bill. It is in the pipeline. It is actually making progress. So we'll see whether that changes any difference. But at the moment, that is one of the challenges in terms of foreigners coming in with their talent. But it does happen. You can look at some of our biggest startups, and they are actually from foreigners. But we've made it work.
I know fintech is a big thing in Ghana. One thing that I was actually shocked by is when you explain to me how they're, we take so many things in America, for granted. We often think so we're number one at everything. I'm going to be honest. People hear me say this when we're everywhere, and the Ghana is the most expensive place to live in Africa. But you're growing at such an interesting rate. It's you don't have a recycling industry for things like glass. You don't have some of the industries that are staple industries in other countries. So I'm seeing some of these startups coming in and not only disrupting the industries that don't exist, but actually setting a gold standard for what's happening elsewhere. And I see that happening in Ghana. I don't see that happening in places like that. And I got to hand it to you. I really respect what you're doing. I love how you get the founders involved in the television shows. And I love how your Medium column is amazing. So I really appreciate everything that you do, Simon. And, I see the boss has jumped on here. So, I don't want to necessarily take up too much time. Ryan, how much time we have left? I don't know if there's any questions at all.
Yeah, we'll do some Q&A. John, why don't you go ahead and unmute? Looks like you want to do a quick announcement here.
Oh, no. I really was just joining. Chris, I want you guys to continue this. This honestly has been an amazing session. So please continue it. I was just joining on more because we're having technical issues and I'm trying to figure out how to use this. But I feel like, if there are any final, maybe let's in the next 5-10 minutes, we will transition to a more event-wide event, but please, I'm going to hide myself, mute myself. Let's keep this going.
Cool.
All right. Well, go ahead, Ryan. You have somebody?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm happy to kind of moderate the chat here, and Chris, feel free to jump in here as well. So Cindy asked a question here around what are your thoughts on startups testing their MVPs in the Indian market? Assuming demographic alignment. So Cindy, just to clarify, it sounds like you're not in India, but you might be launching a product for the Indian market. Chintan, you've got a lot of experience with that. Do you have any opinions?
Yeah, sure. Cindy, welcome. I hope, I'm assuming it's Cindy Gayon from Canada. So welcome. Let us connect offline and I'll be happy to assist you and anchor you in Indian market.
What I can tell you from experience, and Chintan, we talk about this all the time, I've never been able to prototype and get things up live to a testing position faster than I have in India. And, oftentimes, one time I even went to Sweden to get the front end design. So right here off this panel, we can probably build a startup in a box and change the world, which I love, right? And then launch it in Ghana and recycle glass with it, So I don't know, Ryan, if you notice any other questions in there. I see a lot of people drawing attention to what Anna had to say, about the idea that women need to lean in. They really need to take the opportunity that others have dropped and run with it and lead. And, I grew up in a family raised by 3 Sicilian women, Big Nani, and my mother. And, my mother died when I was 25 years old. But, I grew up in a household that really saw change when it came down to things like equal rights and everything. And I think there's a lot of things overlooked when it comes down to women and VC funding. Oftentimes women-led companies, Anna, we've talked about this, are underfunded when it comes down to, or undervalued when it comes down to VC funding. But when you look at the performance numbers from women-led startups, when it comes down to angel investments, they're turning more profit around, over what it would be men-led companies. Why is that, Anna? I think that's fantastic.
Well,
I know that you...
Yeah, humbleness, like talking about grit and humbleness, or humbleness, is that the proper English? I don't know. I think the reason is women do tend to be, at least in Sweden, in general, when women build companies, they are more reluctant to bring in take in other owners and take in capital, risk capital. They're more likely to bootstrap, definitely, and in the second route would be to take a loan, a private loan or something. So women have a longer sort of runway until they actually go out and ask for venture capital. So I would say that could be a reason, that they are more tried and tested once they actually come to an investor. But definitely I don't know why. I mean, it's obviously, you look at the statistics of women-led startups, and it's all higher profit margins and all of that. So it doesn't really make sense for investors to turn away women founders, but they still do. And there's a lot of frustration. I talked to women founders both in Sweden and in the rest of Europe, and there's a lot of frustration because, everything's great on paper, I have the perfect pitch, all of the feedback I get even from FI mentors is positive, talking to over 100 investors, and still the polite sort of yeses that are nos, without any real reason. I think it could be bragging. I think it could be being a little bit more timid about goal setting, or more realistic, maybe. But
That's
I don't
amazing.
know. I think maybe that's also an easy answer.
Well, but you did it so eloquently. I mean, really what it boils down to is, I think that exactly what you said. I mean, I've been more impressed by the bootstrapping and the drive that's coming out of some women-led companies over the last year than I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I just see some amazing things coming out of it. And I love seeing an embrace for this in Sweden. When you look at how companies are set up in Sweden, they really look for things like, equality, everything kind of built into the system in the Nordic region. It's not.
Actually, Sweden is, sorry, but like Sweden is actually great at public relations. So one idea that we have about ourselves is that we are very gender equal. And that's true to some degree. I mean, we have a great maternity leave, we have paternity leave, all of that. But when you look at the numbers of ownership on land and even apartments, women own in total 30%. Obviously, that's a lot less. We have a bigger wage gap than other countries, even in the Baltics, which is more culturally conservative towards women. So there's a big dissonance between how we talk about. We're very female-friendly language-wise and country-wise, but it's not turned into actual paper and money.
Well, you know what, and like I said earlier in this, I love when she tells me I'm wrong, and I just learned something right there. And, for those of you that are disrupting the public relations space, Sweden is looking for PR people all the time. They have it mastered, so that might be a place to hone your craft. Ryan, I don't know if you noticed any other questions in there. I see some people asking about things right there. I saw something interesting. I'm currently working on passionately about a wedding platform in Africa. If you're interested in being an advisor, investor, reach out. I got to tell you, you want to do office hours with advisors. These type of messages come in all the time. And although they're great, right, there's a lot that goes into being an advisor of a company like you, right? So you don't even know if you want me as an advisor or Simon as an advisor or Anna or Chintan. Trust me, they're amazing. But you don't know that yet. But what you do want to do is schedule time with people like us. The FI system obviously has great office hours. We'll make sure we have things in there. Everybody on this panel today has some sort of consultancy. They've helped bring companies into the region. They've helped expand companies out. They've changed the dynamic of the ecosystem in big ways and in small. So it's been an honor having this time with everyone tonight. But I can assure you that the greatest thing that has happened to my life over the last year is being invited into all these areas around the world. And what I've noticed, and I'm just going to kind of leave it at this, Ryan, is that, you know, when you travel the world and look at the different startup ecosystems, one thing I've realized for sure, when you're in Europe, you see tradition like you've never seen before, and it resonates in the way their startup ecosystem works. When you look into the Nordic region, I've never seen commitment like this. I've never seen commitment towards the cause, towards the goals that are set by a region, by the mentors and by the founders. When you look at areas like Asia, and I've spent time in Central Asia now mentoring, and of course, India and everything, you see so much determination. But in India, I've never seen dedication like this in my life from the founders. People that have committed to big world problems, and they're willing to make time necessary to change it from a humble perspective. So I thank everybody from there. You know, I spent time when I'm excited to start mentoring, and some of us here as well in the Gulf region. And I've never seen aspiration like I have when it comes down to the GCC and the Gulf region. But then when you get in areas like the stands, you know, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, all the places where I didn't know where they were on the map, I'm going to admit that in front of all of you. Until I got involved in these regions, I've never seen more resilience in my life. And it shows with the bootstrapping all the way through. In Latin America, that's the place where grit is born. Grit is one of the defining things that I look for when it comes down to founders. And I appreciate so much Guillermo and everyone for getting me involved, and some of my colleagues here down in Colombia and some of these areas in Africa. In Africa, I've never seen community in a way like it is in Africa. Community resonates in the startup scene. It resonates from the moment that you're born to the moment that you die, and thus you live on forever in there. So, you know, it's all of you that are watching tonight. It's people like Ryan, Jonathan, Jenny Chang, Jake Kuzak, the people who originally got me involved in FI. I got to hand it to you. I thank you. You know, there's not a day that goes by where I don't admit the things that I didn't know before I got here. And these three people that joined me tonight taught me a lot of it. So I don't want to take up more time. I know the schedule is thick tonight, Ryan, but I really appreciate you squeezing us in. And coming after Kamal is always hard. And listen to him. He knows what he's talking about.